Welcome all to the hunt, and today we shall be hunting the Frostfang Barioth. This is an interesting little piece of a monster, if only because of how it was presented and how it was introduced into world. Frostfang Barioth, as you can see from this series, has been added very late into Iceborne, surprisingly so, with very little fanfare and or announcement, to be fair. It was there, but not a whole lot of people are even aware of this monster, which is a shame because I think it looks amazing, and although the fight isn't terribly challenging, you know, we take every ounce of new material we can get out of this. And not only that, I think his new design looks cool. From that, I think his new move patterns and little mechanics in the fight also make it a little more interesting from the original Barioth, with perhaps some moves toned down and other turned away the hell up, which I prefer. So let's go over the Frostfang Barioth, what he does, how he's done, and how you should fight it. First of all, you will notice that every time you fight the Frostfang Barioth, it will always be a tempered monster. From my knowledge, it is impossible to fight a Frostfang Barioth non-tempered. It is just like the Scarred Young Garuga, which we've talked and seen in the Scarred Young Garuga episode. The second thing that you will notice is that the Frostfang Barioth does rotational patterns when it comes to how you're supposed to fight it is far different than you would see in most other scenarios. So the Frostfang Barioth always starts the fight in the nest, and you always have time to catch it in this area, specifically in the nest area of the Barioth, which is strange because you never actually go there in game. So the fact that they're making you fight in a location that's extremely cramped makes it a lot more interesting, especially considering the behavioral patterns of the Frostfang Barioth and how it's different than the original. So I like this to begin with. Third of all, thing you will notice is the fur on this thing. Oh my god, I love the fur on this thing. I love it. Even the tusk has like the frost on it with like a little bit of tuffing beard going on. I love it. I love it. It looks like an old ass Barioth that's been left out in the frost. I love it, which is exactly what its lore's about. So I fucking love it. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And I don't think a whole lot of people talk that much about the beard that Barioth get. And yeah, it's just kind of cool. I really like it. The fourth thing that you will notice about the Frostfang Barioth is that, and actually it's been told by a couple of times by the developers, that the main differences between the Frostfang Barioth is that it will use a lot more breath attack. So he has this ability that I called it Frostbite. I don't exactly remember what the developers called it, but essentially it's an ability that he shoots out breaths of ice, and that ice can bind you or nearly root you in place and slow you by a very significant amount. While you're in that, when you're standing in that puddle of ice, per se, you will have significantly reduced movement speed, as well as you are not allowed or able to attack, detach your weapon, sheath your weapon, or use items. You are binded in this thing until you get out. And the Frostfang Barioth has this behavioral patterns that if it's able to catch you in that bind of ice, it will try to slam dunk you, just like the original. And the cool thing about the Frostfang is that if it's enraged, it can chain those. So watch the footage to be sure that, so you can see that whenever he goes for a slam, like here, not in range, he only does it one time. If he's in range and you see the red eye on the minimap, that means that we will chain those and doing 2 in a row, and we'll always target. So look at the head very specifically. That's what I really love, is that if you watch the head for the Frostfang Barioth, it's incredibly easy to know what exactly he's targeting, and that can apply to most other monsters. But it seems to be a lot more an effective method to knowing and predicting what his pattern is going to be than any other monster. And maybe it's just me. I fought a couple of Frostfang Barioth and I just got used to looking at his eyesight. But it seems like the neck movement of the Frostfang dictates a lot more, instead of just being a very straightforward, I'm looking at you directly from a in front of me perspective, instead of having like peripheral vision, if that's a thing. And I just kind of like that to begin with. Again, that's my way of seeing it, but I find it pretty good too. Now, another thing that I really like about the Frostfang Barioth is that since you have to fight him in extremely cramped spaces, and look at that, chaining the slams. He only does 2 in a row, but that's a heavy punish for you. Very heavily punishing. However, like that leads right into the fact that you're fighting him into a really, really cramped space. Since most of your fights is gonna happen in the nest of the Frostfang Barioth, there's this cool thing that will happen where, since you're in really confined spaces, most attacks become a lot more dangerous, but there's also way less gap closing that will happen. It's very rare that you'll find that the Frostfang Barioth would do a crap load of pounce attack and gap closer attacks to begin with. Of course, they'll do the slam, that's theoretically a gap closer, although I will call it more of an executor finishing move, or a heavy damage ability, because it's kind of like its ultimate move. But I find the fight a lot more comfortable, if only for that factor alone, that you have less to deal with in terms of gap closer, which was my original problem with the original Barioth. It's kind of like fighting a Zinogre and you're like, oh, you're at a safe distance, and then, you know, Zinogre reminds you that that's not how that works. Outside of that, let's talk a little bit about his new kit, because he has actually a decent number of attacks that are fairly new. He does a circular breath attack, ice breath attack, that does like a crescent to moon shape that can also bind you, deal massive damage. He has a move in particular where he shoots out a beam of ice in a diagonal fashion from you. So if you try to if you run perpendicularly to the beam, you might just run into it actually, which is a pretty cool attack. And you will do that in a V-shaped scenario. So if he frostbinds the right area and you dodge it, then you will you will shoot another beam on his diagonal left. You know what I mean? He'll shoot in another 45 angry and go the other way. Meaning that he can catch you off guard and you need to constantly stutter step, just like if you're playing Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I really, really like that. So yeah, and like I said, Slam Dunk 2 times in a row, he has a couple of moves like that, but what I really like about the Frostfang Barioth is although he's really hard to notice the patterns, especially since in your crab space that camera can be problematic, what's really interesting is that he's such a punishable monster, because just like the original, if you smash the claws and he does a pounce or gap closer or any moves that require his arms, that will neuter his ability to move, as well as if you break his head, and every time you can break his head, which he has 2 triggers for a head break, since he has 2, you know, tusk, that will lessen the power of his breath attack. So every time you break the head, you will do less breath attack as well as doing less powerful breath attacks. And that's just a really, really cool detail that I really like. It's just like fighting, say, the Fatalis, where breaking the head is incredibly important if you even want to try and survive the fight. Oh god, I'm not looking forward to that. I think that's next episode too. It's gonna be... Damn, it's gonna be a hard one. So let's take a quick little moment to look at the Frostfang Barioth. The Frostfang Barioth hit zone value, shall we? And what I'm flashing on screen right now, you'll see something very interesting about it, is that it's not, if barely different than what the Barioth is. Actually, it might actually be the exact same thing. If you look at it, head at 65, back 30, stomach 38, claws 21, claws broken 25, wings 30, forelegs 40, hind legs 25, tail 45, and tail 60. I'm pretty sure those are the exact same, like the exact same stats. So, although that's very interesting to see, you know what? Here's both of them on screen right now, Frostfang and normal Barioth, and I'm pretty sure those are the exact same stats. So, if there was ever a strategy to apply to fighting the Frostfang Barioth, it's essentially just like the normal Barioth, but you have to watch out for new kits, new move kits. Aside of that, yeah, I like Frostfang Barioth. I like him quite a bit. I know a lot of people are like, I'm fine with it. Yeah. Alright guys, thank you all for watching. We'll see you all for another hunt.